Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. As you can see, U.S. seized another tanker, and the location in which we chose to seize it, to me, is a little bit telling. Now, this has to do with the U.S. sanctions and making sure that no sanctioned oil is making its way out, but it's pretty telling, in my opinion, of what is coming up in the future. We also have what appears to be just an impending war with Iran. Israel has already came out and stated that they have now basically lowered their threshold. It's no longer about, Iran getting enriched uranium. Israel's now stating it's their ballistic missile program that they're worried about, which is leading pretty much everybody to fear that we are going to basically end up having a war sparked off by Israel bombing Iran. And I do not know whether or not the United States is even ready for what's to come because of the statements that have came out from the Iranian regime. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to see you guys. I want to give a good shout out to Snow Days for coming in right off the bat and gifting out 5 Speak the Truth memberships. I appreciate you guys' patience over the week as I've like last weekend. Let's see, the last time I went live was Thursday morning and then ended up having to deal with a bunch of crap Thursday night and Friday. All day long was just tied up. So I apologize for not being able to make it back in, but believe it or not, Matt does have a personal life. He's got to take care of stuff. Before we start talking about one, that particular oil tanker, and two, everything that's leading up to the U.S. for what I believe to be an impending strike on Iran, like it is coming. I want to bring to you guys 2 things I ended up noticing over here in the United States that if you're tracking this situation, you'll probably be, pretty intrigued by this as well. Allow me to introduce to you proposed State Bill 624. Assault and battery definition of Islamophobia along with the penalty. This is woke Virginia. Assault and battery defined as Islamophobia as it relates to the crime of assault and battery as malicious prejudice and hatred directed towards Islam or Muslims. Okay. The definition applies regardless of whether the victim is actually a practitioner of Islam. Weird. Provided that the perpetrator targeted such victim based on perceived adherence to such faith. The bill also clarifies that religious conviction includes Islam. The bill directs the Department of State Police in consultation with the Office of the Attorney General and the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to include the bill's definition of Islamophobia in its hate crime reporting central repository. So, by simply being labeled as Islamophobic, you can all of a sudden just get tried for assault. That's absolutely ridiculous. Even if the victim is not, by the way, Islamic, and that goes across all hate crimes, as long as the perpetrator of the crime perceives, so that's kind of, how do you want to say this? That's kind of fluid with how you could perceive this across the board. But as long as the perpetrator perceives the other individual, it would be the same for if it was a hate crime for somebody being black or Indian or gay or whatever, regardless of if they're actually gay. If they get targeted for that reason, it's still a hate crime. But yeah, that's what's being pushed over inside Virginia. Incog Faraday coming in, giving out 5 Speak the Truth memberships. Appreciate you, man. And one last thing before we start to get into this, I want to quote this correctly. I am correct. It was Amy Meck that ended up coming out the report that the McKinney Islamic Association, the IMA, this is down outside of Dallas in Texas, where there's apparently a huge situation going on over there, is continuing on with things. It also appears that somebody that operates out of there is practicing Sharia law and that they have an Islamic court. And at first I didn't believe it until I looked into it. I looked at the site that Amy had, up on there, saying that this particular sheikh right here was practicing it. And you sit on the website long enough and a banner scrolls across the top that says website updated for clarity only. Our religious non-binding services remain exactly the same. Now, it's very important to read what they have up here for his description, which is, by the way, the Islamic Tribunal. And it says Sheikh Mohammed Al-Gebali, advisor, chair, community scholar. Goes on to state, and again, this is as of right now, goes on to state that he's a leader and educator in North Texas, currently serves as the EBOM for McKinney Islamic Association and as the resident scholar of the Saladin Islamic Center in Plano, Texas. Only problem is when you go over to Wayback Machine, you take a look at it, this is actually what it shows. And this is, I believe the last capture was in November, if I remember right from when I pulled it. And here we have Sheikh Mohammed Al-Ghibali, right? shows him as the current president of the Islamic Tribunal. So they're quite literally stating president of an Islamic tribunal. Ghost Hybrid says, can we just have blanket hate crime provision? Why does every special interest group need caveats? What if the victim is targeted for being white? Yeah, no, 100%. That would also fall underneath hate crime. Now, here's the thing. What people are saying that have read through all of the legislation, I have yet to read through it, is this hate crime, in particular in Virginia, the reason why it's such a big deal is because you could be labeled as Islamophobic because of the words that you use and get charged with assault and assault with a hate crime enhancement because the words you are saying perceived as Islamophobic. So it's actually adding to the already existing hate crime laws that are out there. I hope that makes sense for you. Now, here's the problem. The current president of the Islamic Tribunal, imam of the McKinney Islamic Association and the resident scholar Sahadin, Islamic Center in Plano, Texas, fatwa hotline member with the Assembly of Muslim Jurists at North America, a graduate of Al-Azhar University, 96, instructor, blah, 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 blah. Now, when we go to his present biography, it says, at the Islamic Tribunal, which I don't see him being labeled as president of the Islamic Tribunal. At the Islamic Tribunal, he provides non-binding, faith-based guidance and pastoral support. His role does not involve legal authority or judicial decision-making, which is weird because he was the president of the Islamic Tribunal, and they had that stated right up top. And so now, all of a sudden, it's going away. And it's kind of a big deal because Sharia law has been outlawed, over inside of Texas. And as you guys know, Governor Abbott also made the Muslim Brotherhood a foreign terror organization, along with what's his name, the governor out of Florida. They both did it, and Kerr is a little bit pissed off about the entire thing. Now, with that being said, let's take you guys over and give you an update on the Iran situation, what's taking place over there. They did end up having their meeting over on Friday. The descriptions that I was hearing come out of the meeting from those that are familiar with the matter, I'll just go ahead and use some, mainstream media language here to keep my butt safe, was that it was very fragile and the talks were very fragile, and Iran still didn't want to look anything past talking about uranium enrichment. And everybody in the Middle East, like a bunch of Middle Eastern nations, have all came out and said that they want the U.S. to have 3 years stay, basically to back off this entire situation and allow Iran to continue to enrich uranium up to 1.5% peacefully and transfer a bunch of their enriched uranium to another country. I don't think the United States is going to have it. Here's Trump.
Mr. President, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner met with Iran's foreign minister today. You also had Brad Cooper there, the head of CENTCOM. A deal doesn't look like it's been reached yet. How long are you willing to wait?
It can be reached. Well, you have to get in position. We have plenty of time. If you remember Venezuela, we waited around for a while, and we're in no rush. We have, very good talks going with Iran. We have very good talks going with Russia and Ukraine. We're doing a lot of good talking, and I think we had the results today were with Iran. It was a meeting. We're going to meet again early next week, and they want to make a deal. Iran, as they should, want to make a deal. They know the consequences if they don't. If they don't make a deal, the consequences are very steep. So we'll see what happens. But they had a very good meeting with a very high representative of Iran, and we'll see how it all turns out.
They had a very good meeting with a very high-ranking, very high-ranking member from Iran, and we're going to see how it works out. They want to make a deal. Well, of course they want to make a deal. They want to make a deal that allows them to enrich uranium. And as you just heard, Donald Trump isn't going to allow them to continue to enrich uranium. That's a bit troubling because we also saw statements and reports that ended up coming out of Israel that they no longer are going to just look at the nuclear threat and everything else, that they're also looking at Iran's ballistic missile threat. And this is coming after last week when Iran moved a brand new ballistic missile into position that's capable of reaching Israel within about 10 minutes. Now, subsequently, that means all of the U.S. forces that are scattered throughout the region can be reached in under 10 minutes, minus a couple outliers that are out there. And this is a huge problem for the United States of America. Now, I want you to reference all the way back to when I talked about the United States intercepting that vessel. It was traveling from the Caribbean all the way over. Let me open up Google Maps. The United States said it was tracking the ship from the Caribbean. You guys are going to want to see this. We knew it was sanctioned, and before, we had plenty of people down here. So here's the Caribbean outside of Venezuela. This is where the U.S. began tracking that vessel. We did not intercept that vessel until it reached the Indian Ocean. We waited for it to travel all the way across the Atlantic, all the way around to Africa, and get inside the Indian Ocean. And that is if it didn't go through the Red Sea and around Yemen and everything else. Why do I think that's significant? Because in the past, all of these sanctioned vessels coming out of Venezuela or being sent from Iran to Venezuela that the U.S. has been intercepting, we intercepted over here. Minus the one that we chased all the way up north, up above the UK. And then Russia sent the nuclear sub after. This one, we allowed it to get all the way over to the Indian Ocean. And the question would be why? And in my mind, that why is answered quite simply. That the United States moved a buttload of its military assets over into the Indian Ocean. Now, it is possible that we waited for, court rulings or something like that to go in and get this vessel. But the fact is all of that has already been decided. We already know which vessels are sanctioned, which ones they're doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you're talking about a long time traveling between here and here. Between the Caribbean and the Indian Ocean. That takes a long time. So we waited until it got over here. Now, why would we do that? Because the U.S. has been staging for a war with Iran. We've been moving aircraft carriers, and you guys are about to see a bunch of lift aircraft that have been going in and out of the region and everything else. And I see some of you guys are finally, it's clicking down there in the comment section. We waited all the way till they got over here. So if we moved a bunch of our deployable assets to that region, we probably have a little bit outside of Venezuela just to keep an eye on things, to continue to blow up drug boats. But when it goes to interdiction assets and all this other crap, that's where it's at. And I'll remind you that back in November, the United States also interdicted another cargo ship that was heading from China over to Iran, somewhere in this vicinity as well. And we ended up pulling off a bunch of weapons and weapons components that China was sending into Iran. And the U.S. made that announcement back in November. This is not stuff that Matt's pulling out of the thin air. These are actually facts that are taking place on the ground. So when we start looking at what's taking place over there, it becomes a bit more of a problem. Now, this gentleman I'm about to put up on your screen, he is Iran's foreign minister. He came out and he stated that if the United States launches an attack, and this is, again, another reaffirming statement, if the United States, or Israel for that matter, ends up launching an attack on Iran, that they have no other choice than to target U.S. bases in the region because they can't reach mainland United States from where they're at. They don't have the ability to project themselves. Now, I think that that's partially true, but it's also a very disturbing statement because of how unsecure the border has been for the last, 6, 7, 8, 2 decades. The United States has flat out came out and said that they've thwarted Iranian attacks here on U.S. soil that were meant to be lethal in nature. It is possible that the U.S. that Iran has sleeper cells in the United States or is recruiting agents online here in the United States of America to do their ill bidding. So what the Iranian foreign minister just admitted was willingness and wanting to attack the United States of America on their mainland, but he claims that they can't do it. So because of that, they're going to be attacking U.S. bases in the region as all of this goes off. And I'll remind you again that, guess what? The United States, we've got about 50,000 troops scattered across the Middle East. Dozens of different camps and places. Last week, the United States ended up pulling our troops out from over inside of Syria, escorting ISIS fighters, and what appears to be pulling them back into Iraq. Heavy lift aircraft from the United States government were spotted landing in Syria and taking back off as well. So we're pulling all these troops back, in my opinion, underneath surface-to-air coverage so that they don't get hit by ballistic missiles. Pecan says only one person in Iran who has the authority to do anything. So why do we waste our time talking with those people? Well, I agree. And that's one of the things that J.D. Vance came out and said last week, that the people we are negotiating with are not decision makers, nor do they have the authority to be the decision makers. They are carrying forward the Ayatollah's freaking intent. They're carrying forward the Ayatollah's requests, wishes, and goals. And so it's like negotiating with somebody that doesn't have any power. They show up and they repeat the same crap. I told them I might as well just send a letter to the United States of America that says, well, this is the only thing I'm going to be okay with. And when we should take that letter, and quite frankly, it would be way easier than these negotiations. But I have a feeling that we are holding off on the negotiations for a reason. Benjamin Netanyahu ended up retweeting this video today. Check this out.
What would happen if the U.S. Navy suddenly attacked Iran today? At first glance, Iran does not look strong enough to stop such an attack. Iran's Navy and Air Force are much weaker compared to the United States. Its Navy mostly uses old submarines from the Soviet era, a small number of warships, and one drone carrier. Its Air Force depends on older fighter jets like the F-4 Phantom and MiG-29. Because of this, Iran appears easy to defeat in a direct fight. But the full story is not that simple. The U.S. Navy force moving toward Iran would be extremely powerful. It would likely include one of America's strongest aircraft carriers, the USS Abraham Lincoln. This carrier can carry around 70 to 80 aircraft, such as F-18 fighter jets, F-35 stealth jets, electronic warfare planes, radar aircraft, and military helicopters. Along with the carrier, several U.S. destroyers would also be present, including the USS Frank E. Peterson Jr.
Now, you guys see all this and what they're talking through, and I'll remind you that we have multiple that have moved into the region. Multiple.
Compared to Iran's Navy and Air Force, this force is far more advanced and powerful. However, Iran's real strength is not its ships or planes. Over the last 10 years, Iran has focused on other weapons. It has built a large supply of missiles, developed large numbers of low-cost drones, and supported armed groups across the region. These tools allow Iran to strike back in different ways, even when facing a much stronger military.
Now, remember everything that I just told you, and then remember the fact that I said that Netanyahu put this video out. Like, obviously, it came from a TikTok video that he ended up grabbing, but nonetheless, the question is, why would you end up putting out a video on ballistic missiles being fired and how that is their biggest threat? Obviously, the U.S. strike carrier groups are going to be way better than Iran's Navy, way better than their Air Force. We're going to be able to overwhelm them. No problem. Israel proved that during the 12-day war, and so the United States of America, that they are just quite literally no match for us. But what Iran did prove is their ability to penetrate the Iron Dome system that Israel employs. And, all right, the U.S. also ended up employing our THAAD batteries that we have over there as well. And right now, when you guys see this here in just a second, we have been moving a buttload of aircraft over into the region over the weekend. Because of what I'm about to show you, I stand by my assessment that the only reason the U.S. is engaging in these talks with Iran is because we are stalling to get more aerial defense assets into the region. Every red dot you see up on the screen here is a U.S. base, and those lines that you see, right, are U.S. bases that are within range of currently known Iranian ballistic missile capabilities. And let's not forget their cruise missiles that they also have that are going to be shot across the region. So this is not something that we can merely look at and say, well, maybe. Look at the UAE, look at Qatar, look down in Kuwait. Obviously, look at Iraq. I believe Syria was actually evacuated. I do believe that. Look over inside Jordan, Saudi Arabia. I mean, come on, people. We have a very serious threat from the range of these Iranian ballistic missiles. And the United States is going to have to ensure before we attack Iran, because what we're talking about right now, and most certainly what it seems, is that we are not just going for a brief shock and awe campaign where we just slam them and call it a day. What it looks like we're trying to do is actually work with the people on the ground and take out key figures and key targets that would actually allow an overthrow of the entire Iranian regime. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the craziest parts about all of this. Oh, my Lord. Israeli defense officials have came out, and I'm going to quote, "We told the Americans we will strike alone if Iran crosses the red line we set on ballistic missiles." Also adding that Israel is not yet at a threshold, but is continuously tracking developments inside of Iran. Allegedly, Israeli officials are also concerned that Trump will adopt a limited strike model. So, I don't believe that one tiny bit that Trump is trying to adopt a limited strike model. I think we have sprinkles of truth that are going down in here. A lot of the information that I often see come out of Israel and back to the United States and being filtered, particularly when it comes from anonymous defense officials, to me, always have sprinkles of garbage that are mixed in there. What I do believe inside of this is that Israel most certainly lowered their threshold as far as strikes go. But obviously, we have reason for concern that the U.S. wouldn't carry through with it after the 12-day war when Trump called Israel and told them to not drop those last couple bombs that they wanted to drop. So it's also reasonable to believe that that would be a genuine fear inside of Israel. So when they come out and they're stating that they're more worried about the ballistic missiles, they're not lying. Now, here's the catch, and it doesn't matter for the United States of America. If the United States of America doesn't even partake into attacking Iran whatsoever, and it's just Israel that launches a unilateral strike, they will still go after U.S. bases in the region. They will immediately trigger those ballistic missiles on pre-designated targets and send them flying, which puts U.S. troops directly in danger. So Trump has to act within his best mind frame, along with Pete Hegseth, to try to get our troops immediate coverage. Again, we look at the range of their ballistic missiles, ladies and gentlemen. They go all the way up into NATO countries, all the way up there. Take a look at here. Take a look at the top left corner of this map. They have to get them up there. Without a doubt, beyond the shadow of a doubt, we have to provide that coverage. And let's not forget about ballistic missiles and things like that the Houthis still have down in Yemen. Iran still has great influence over them. So all of these are a very serious concern to the United States of America. We have to take care of those troops. I'll also remind you that, I think it was 3 U.S. troops ended up getting killed over inside of Jordan at this one base that's right up over here in the corner. Okay, right up here on your map a couple years ago, because Iranian-backed militias had fired, essentially what they did was the U.S. was launching surveillance drones out of this base, and then the Iranian militia kind of went right behind it, so that when the radar ended up picking up on it, they thought it was a fluke. They thought it was a problem. And a one-way suicide attack drone ended up splashing down over inside of Jordan and killing U.S. troops and wounding others. There's also the probability that things like that take place, right? And while the United States might not have to necessarily worry about all of the different sleeper cells, which you guys are about to see here in a little bit, we do have troops that are over inside of the Middle East, and those troops most certainly have to worry about those sleeper cells. That's also another big concern for the United States. You're about to see some other things that come up. This video that I'm about to show you is from Iran, and I do think it's also indicative and significant that strikes are starting to come up. I told you guys, in order to have a regime change, in order to see the forecasting of a regime change, what we would need to be able to see is actually Iranian forces that are defecting. Now, what this video reportedly shows is Iranian members of the Iranian paramilitary forces on the ground. It's not clear in this video whether or not it's like Shia militias that are working for the IRGC, which we have seen on the ground there, or whether or not this is a police force, etc. But allegedly, they ended up setting their own vehicles on fire. Now, why is this significant, ladies and gentlemen? Sorry, I just wanted to fast forward because there's a bit of a screenshot where you can see it's not just 1 or 2 vehicles. It actually appears to be a line of them going down the road here. She says it's Iranian special forces. Maybe she's leaning towards the IRGC. But when we're talking about unconventional warfare, we're talking about an insurgency, which in this case, the insurgency would be there to overthrow the government of Iran. We would need to see that happening. And it is possible at this point that they're entering into, this clandestine phase. But what we're waiting for them to get into is what's going to be known as the war of movement phase of the operation, where they become overt. However, prior to that war of movement phase taking place, what you end up having happen is things like this, where you have sabotage operations that become readily apparent. I'll say it again, readily apparent sabotage operations. This is clearly a civilian driving down the road right over there next to all of these vehicles that are being lit up and on fire. That is particularly why I think this video is so important. Because if what is reported inside of this video is true, then we are moving towards that war of movement at the exact same time that we have the United States positioning itself and Israel coming out with even stronger rhetoric against the Iranian regime, talking directly about their ballistic missile program and stating that they may even do it unilaterally without U.S. assistance. Now, if that's true, that would mean that Mossad is likely operating the agents on the ground that are doing this. And that's very important for you guys to understand that this strike, this upcoming operation to overthrow the Iranian regime, is not just something where we hope and pray that by dropping bombs on various targets that they will somehow be able to overthrow their government. I told you guys about being patient and waiting for more information and everything else to come out. And in the beginning, all we saw was people getting slaughtered in the streets. We saw bodies getting stacked up. We saw all of this stuff. Meanwhile, what's going to be happening behind the scenes over the last month is coordinating efforts. You've got to make sure that you have the right people in the right positions in order to carry out a coup, if that makes any sense at all. And that's not something that the United States or Israel could rush. We can't simply do that. We have to wait for the situation to develop. And when we see things like this, when we see overt actions of sabotage or reportedly overt actions of sabotage, which those things are contradictory within the same statement, right? But what appears to be overt actions of sabotage, that tells me that we're getting very close to that war movement phase. So what would we likely see next? Well, likely what we would end up seeing, all right, is instead of having, those troops turning machine guns on their own civilians, that those machine guns end up turning around and they start pointing at, regime forces. So you'll, in the middle of these bombings and everything that's going to take place, they're going to knock out communication systems. They're going to knock out, radar sites. Obviously, they're going to go after the ballistic missiles. Obviously, they're going to go after key figures and stuff like that. But you're also going to see this immediate pop. If true, if that's what we're working towards, you're going to see this immediate pop of who used to be or who would be perceived to be regime forces attacking and killing their own. Johnny, 44 5 boy, says the amount of C-17s and C-5s going back and forth in the Middle East from the States is mind-blowing. It's been 24/7 for weeks now. You are correct. What I've got up on your screen here is from January 23rd through February 3rd. I'll say that again. This is a list, excuse me, January 23rd through February 9th. This is not a single list. This is two lists. This is one here and this is one here. All of these are heavy lift aircraft going from the United States and traveling towards the Middle East and U.S. bases that are within the region. This is also very significant, ladies and gentlemen. This is also very significant. This is a lot of movement. This is a buttload of movement. This is priority movement, getting these aircraft over into the region. And they're going to be carrying, remember how I ended up putting everything up. The Iranian ballistic missiles can reach all the way over here, all right, and all the way down here. They have that capability. So if the U.S. is going to be, protecting itself from an impending Iranian, ballistic missile strike, this is what we're seeing. This is what we're seeing. We're seeing these aircraft going in and doing just that. We're seeing them going in, and what they would be likely moving into position, again, is aerial defense assets because of those ballistic missile threats. Iran knows, and the regime knows, that they are going to be done after this. That very likely, if not the United States, even just Israel, has plans for a coup, which again, we are seeing signs of, then they are going to throw every stinking ballistic missile they have in order to make a statement. And it's not as easy as everybody says. If the United States drops a bomb and kills the Ayatollah, that's not going to look very good for the United States of America. However, if we or Mossad are passing intelligence to these resistance groups that have formed inside of the country, to these insurgencies, that have formed inside of the country to go after the current regime, and we pass that intel off to them and we keep them isolated with our bombs, it looks totally different. Totally different when you have local nationals grabbing the Ayatollah by his scrumptious little beard and putting a bullet inside of his head like we saw happen with Muammar Gaddafi. Then it doesn't look like the U.S. killed him. Then it looks like he got justice from his own people. And all of a sudden, that holy war isn't directed at the United States. So again, there is a lot of different moving parts and pieces that end up going into this. And I just implore you guys to exercise some patience. Now, I told you guys about a bunch of lift aircraft that were moving over there. But I also want you guys to know that we had fast movers, F-35, stealth fighter jets, etc., that have also been rotating over there from mainland United States. Now, I played that video for you to show multiple things. One, what Netanyahu's leaning towards, and two, what a strike carrier group is capable of. And it also ends up touching on the ballistic missile capabilities of Iran. But in my opinion, if we are moving more fighter jets into the region, it also should spark your ears wide open. We've already got 3 squadrons of fighters hanging out in Jordan. They're likely going to be responsible for chasing down, cruise missiles that are fired by Iran towards Israel and U.S. bases and things like that, shooting those out of the sky. But when we start moving stealth fighters, which is the report that I was reading on, I can't remember if that's the right graphic. When we start moving more stealth fighters into the region and basing them on the ground, that to me signifies that we have a lot of targets that we intend on hitting. Why waste an F-35 going after freaking, cruise missiles and drones when it could be dropping bombs? And what we're seeing is our stealth fighters that are heading over into the region as well. In addition to the strike carrier groups, in addition to the, ballistic missile defense assets that the U.S. is moving over there. In addition to the U.S. pulling troops out of Syria and likely under the cover of those defense assets. In addition to recovering ISIS fighters and all that other crap that we've been doing. In addition to a U.S. destroyer being parked over outside of Israel, likely for more ballistic missile defense. Ghost Hybrid says the launch systems and control centers will be handled as much as possible in the first wave. I agree with that statement as well. F Google sucks. Iran's really the staging area for war with the Axis. July 4th coming. Happy birthday. Yeah, it is. And when I talked earlier about us going after that, that oil tanker over inside of the Indian Ocean, where the U.S. says we ended up interdicting it, I also want you to think that it could be a little bit deeper than that, because we know that the IRGC has been operating vessels from Venezuela, from Iran to Venezuela, back into China, and apparently moving a bunch of gold for the Russians as well. So we know all this money laundering and blah, 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 blah is taking place. My thought number one is that the United States waited for it to get to the Indian Ocean because that's where we have the bulk of our assets. In order for it to get to China, it's going to cross through there anyways. So why not just wait until it comes near our assets? It's much easier to move it down south a little bit, chase this sucker down, and then move it back up north, right? Or maybe even just launch it from the platform of where we're at, because we've got those types of capabilities. It's much easier to do that. The other thought that I ended up having was sending a message to China that we are now in control of the Indian Ocean, that we are now over there controlling that, because China and Russia have been using that area for smuggling routes as well, trying to escape U.S. sanctions, which is part of the reason the Houthis were down in Yemen, shutting down the Red Sea, screwing everybody over, including the EU. So it could also be a message to China that we're sending kind of, just a flat out in your face deal. Now, I'm going to speed this up because this is, trying to remember his dang name. The Prince Pahlavi. Let me get this up for you. I sped it up a little bit because he talks slow, but it's important that you listen to the message that he puts out.
To all of our friends around the world, under the yoke of the Islamic Republic, Iran is identified in your minds with terrorism, extremism, and poverty. The real Iran is a different Iran, a beautiful, peace-loving, and flourishing Iran. It is the Iran that existed before the Islamic Republic, And it is the Iran that will rise again from its ashes the day the Islamic Republic falls. So let me be clear about how a free Iran will act towards its neighbors and the world after the fall of this regime. In security and foreign policy, Iran's nuclear military program will end. Support for terrorist groups will cease immediately. A free Iran will work with regional and global partners to confront terrorism, organized crime, drug trafficking, and extremist Islamism.
Now, it's very interesting listening to the words that are coming out of his mouth, because what he's actually hinting towards and what he's actually talking about is U.S. policy. What he's pushing, if you listen to what he's saying, is U.S. policy. And he's also stating very clearly that the regime is done.
Iran will act as a friend and a stabilizing force in the region, and it will be a responsible partner in global security. In diplomacy, relations with the United States will be normalized, and our friendship with America and her people will be restored. The State of Israel will be recognized immediately. We will pursue the expansion of the Abraham Accords into the Cyrus Accords, bringing together a free Iran, Israel, and the Arab world. A new chapter will begin, grounded in mutual recognition, sovereignty, and national interest.
Now, notice how he talked about the Abraham Accords and getting Iran on board with those, because Saudi Arabia has been pretty dang silent on them ever since, and pretty sure has backed out. What this tells me, when I listen to the words he says, he starts off with the U.S.'s agenda, and then he pushes into the Israeli agenda. Obviously, he talks about the people of Iran being free. But through his speech alone, we could assume that this is going to be a joint effort by the United States and Israel, probably to put this dude in power. He has stated, this man has stated numerous times that he has been in contact with U.S. officials. And it's very clear that he didn't just talk about U.S. policy and our worries, but also about Israeli policies and their worries. Which means that the United States and Israel, for a lack of better terms, would be inserting a puppet government at this point in time.
In energy, Iran holds some of the largest oil and gas reserves in the world. A free Iran will become a reliable energy supplier to the free world. Policymaking will be transparent. Iran's actions will be responsible. Prices will be predictable. In transparency and governance, Iran will adopt and enforce international standards. Money laundering will be confronted. Organized corruption will be dismantled. Public institutions will answer to the people. In the economy, Iran is one of the world's last great untapped markets. Our population is educated, modern, with a diaspora that connects it to the four corners of the world. A democratic Iran will open its economy to trade, investment, and innovation, and Iran will seek to invest in the world. Opportunity will replace isolation. This is not an abstract vision. It is a practical one, grounded in national interest, stability, and cooperation. To achieve this, now is the time to stand with the Iranian people. The fall of the Islamic Republic and the establishment of a secular, democratic government in Iran will not only restore dignity to my people, it will benefit the region and the world.
You guys hear this, right? He's talking about world stage matters. And I want you to picture this, because everybody over inside of Iran right now is getting slaughtered. People are estimating well over 100,000 have been killed. Even the Iranian regime says that well over 30,000. And the message that he puts out is not centric to what is being done to the people over inside of Iran. Instead, he's putting out a message about the world stage. Now, if you can read between the lines, if he was only concerned with the people over inside of Iran, if he was only concerned with returning to rule, if he was only concerned with taking care of his people, that's where he would be at, but he's not. He's speaking specifically about what is taking place and what needs to happen, which is defunding and cutting ties and getting rid of those terrorist organizations ensuring international partnerships, and Israel into the Abraham Accords. For the love of God, it's pretty obvious to me and probably everybody else. And I know if I can see this, the frickin' regime over inside of Iran most certainly can see it as well. That there is a active resistance group that is forming and has formed that certainly looks like it's about to jump into that war of movement stage, and it's going to be precisely timed about the same time that bombs from the United States and Israel start falling on that country. And we have moved so many assets into that region that Iran will not be able to do a dang thing about it other than fire off every ballistic missile and drone that they have in an attempt to inflict mass casualties across the region against coalition forces that are standing against them. That's a problem. So the United States is taking its sweet time in order to make all of that happen. And as I stated, the man has been in contact with U.S. officials. So when we see these guns right here, instead of pointed towards protesters, turns around and they're pointed at each other, you will know exactly what's going on. We know for a fact Mossad agents have been operating inside of Iran. We know about drone factories that were being built by Afghans. We know all of this stuff. We've also seen what looked like Israeli SF guys or intelligence agency guys that were actually on the ground inside of Iran the last time. So it would not surprise me. Now, over the weekend, Iran came out with some new announcements and rhetoric saying that they have it confirmed. Allegedly, one of our GBU 57s, the 30,000-pound bunker busters, didn't go off, and that they're holding on to it, and that they're trying to reverse engineer it. Now, if true, this is a bomb that the United States spent almost 20 years developing. We had over 100 test shots of this thing, dropping it on targets all over the place. Iran did release some images to make it appear as if that's the case. But if it didn't detonate, that means it was buried far underground in some of these different uranium enrichment sites. And I showed you guys satellite imagery updated from last week where the regime was refortifying their positions, refortifying Fordow, where they were stacking up dirt, covering it up, getting ready for more strikes. I'm going to be honest with you, even if this bomb did end up entering the ground and they were able to recover it and pull it out, whatever, I honestly don't care because they don't have an aircraft capable of delivering it. Totally irrelevant. Matter of fact, Israel doesn't even have an aircraft capable of delivering this particular bomb. People are acting like this is a huge deal. No, because Iran doesn't have the technology to fly something like that anywhere. Now, they could give it to China. They could give it to Russia. Russia and China would be very interested in it. And if the United States wants to secure this, if it is in fact true, then we're going to have to move pretty quick so that that does not get into the hands of our enemies. But we're talking 6-7 months later. We know for a fact that we have Russian scientists on the ground. It's pretty much a lost cause. Do I think that this is going to force the United States forces or Israeli forces to act any quicker at all because we have a bomb buried deep inside the ground? And while Iran might claim that they have it, I want to remind you this thing is a 30,000-pound bomb. It's not just a tiny little lawn dart. This thing penetrated like massive amounts of mountains, like so deep. Good luck having Iran dig that thing out of there. I would be scared to dig around it just in case it detonated. You're not going to want to operate radio equipment around this thing. You're not going to want to shake it. You're not going to want to do anything. So if they did find it, it's likely at the bottom of a damn hole that they're too worried about messing with, and they got to be very careful not to shake the ground around it if we were to actually apply common sense to this situation. Now, there's also sources that are stating that it is not the bunker buster that they have, the 30,000-pound bomb. that it could just potentially be like a Tomahawk or something of that nature that they have, that they're toting, that they actually have. Now, I showed you on the Iranian side, if we're seeing signs of a resistance movement, resistance group that's actually formed, and that is moving, riding on the Iranian government. We're seeing, my opinion, some sabotage actions that are taking place, and all of this stuff and the nature in which they look like mean that when these bombs drop, I got a feeling we're going to see a war of movement phase kick in to where they just start riding against the regime. These civil uprisings and everything that you're seeing, by the way, are right out the dang handbook. Now, this comes out of Israel. And I'm bringing this up for a reason. You guys remember how I talked about, and I had told you that Iran's foreign minister had openly stated that they don't have the ability to attack the United States with their ballistic missiles, so they're going to have to target U.S. bases and stuff like that in the region. But I brought up sleeper cells, and I brought up foreign agents meaning somebody that they had recruited that were on the ground over there, like an actual source that they can use to go out and do things, right? Here, we have right outside of Judea, Samaria, West Bank, I don't care what you call it, dozens of quote-unquote Palestinians, all appearing to be military-aged males that got caught trying to cross the border and over into Israel. Why would I bring this up? Because the other things that we noticed during the height of the war and across the war in Gaza is that when Iran was getting froggy, they do have coordinations with Hezbollah. They do have coordinations with Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, but more importantly, with the PA, or the Palestinian Authority. And if they're going to be coordinating any sort of attack against Israel, they're going to want the same thing that's taking place over inside of Iran right now. They would want saboteurs. They would want active shooters. They would want explosions. They would want suicide bombers. They would want all of that crap pushing into Israel, waiting to be activated. So not only are we seeing signs of things are about to go down over inside of Iran, we're also seeing signs come out of Israel that things are about to be going down over there as well. And it most certainly appears as if Iran is attempting to push in sleeper cells for inevitable attack. These guys would be very important. They could also be spotters, providing information on ballistic missiles and where they're landing. They could be sending intel back. These guys could be doing a ton of different things. But take a look at how big this group is. This isn't a small group. This isn't a couple guys sneaking across the border. This is dozens and dozens of military-aged males. I should probably count them at some point. Rafa Buresh coming in and gifting out too. Thank you very much, sir. Look, nice single female. You know, the other thing that's kind of troubling about this as well, you don't see a lot of baggage with them. You see some small bags. But most of these guys are coming across with diddly squat. Diddly squat. A lot of them, look right there, don't have anything. Because they're going to be, if what I said is true, they're likely going to be falling in on other stuff. So we do have a lot of indicators that all of this is about to go down and it's about to be ugly. It's just a fact. Now, something else to talk about how this ties into the overall big picture and how the U.S. is moving to start combating this. When I've pulled it up in the past and I've talked to you guys about it, I have told you that Iran, Russia, and China, in my opinion, are this new axis of evil. Ripping Maduro out was the first part of cutting the legs out from underneath these people. When we rip Iran out and we end up getting that regime out of power, and we put in a puppet government, that's going to be a massive blow to Russia and China. Huge blow to Russia and China. It's going to allow us to, one, have freedom of movement through the Strait of Hormuz, oil prices, things like that. We're going to have a lot better control over those going into the future. But it also means that Russia and China are going to start to get desperate. And one of my main concerns, obviously, is either of them acting out. And I think that is the same concern that Trump has, which is why he's pushing to take Greenland and pushing to have that whole deal going in. But are we seeing signs of anything else that might be, I don't know, indicative that the U.S. is a bit worried? And the answer is absolutely we are. We're looking at moving into Australia and having ports set up in place and having what appears to be permanently positioned U.S. nuclear submarines over outside of Australia. Australia, for those of you guys that don't know, is kind of strategically positioned for exactly what I just talked about. Here it is down here at the base. Here's the Indian Ocean where we just ended up going after, that one tanker. And there's China, Taiwan, all that crap, all up here. Philippines, blah, 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 blah. And so the U.S. moving up to 4 nuclear submarines for permanent base is kind of a big deal. And they're scheduled to be there by 2027, according to reports. That's insane. And the fact that the United States government is announcing this is also crazy. The movement of our nuclear submarines when they're underway is secret. We don't talk about it. We don't announce where they're at or what they're doing. And we have announced in the past them being outside of Iran. We have announced in the past them being outside of Russia. But what the United States is now doing is announcing that we're moving them over into Australia, which is going to give us shorter access to react to Russia and China over inside of the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean. That's a big deal. We're already in February of 2026 and 2027 is creeping up right as we're about to be striking the hell out of these bastards. And if we're planning on putting ports over there for these ships to refit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, yeah, that's a big deal. I see somebody say, Matt, UK giving up Diego Garcia. That is unreal. I haven't read on that one yet. That somehow missed me. But either way, it's a big deal. And so what we're seeing right now is we're seeing signs that we are about to be bombing the crap out of Iran. I stand by saying that this is an inevitability. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And unfortunately, I don't have the intelligence to tell you when those particular pieces are going to be moved into place. But I do know if we're still seeing these C-17s and stuff like that that are flying into this Middle East region, I don't care where they're going, whether it be Turkey or landing over inside of Iraq, it takes time to get those aerial defense assets up and in place. Now, it could also be that those systems are already in place, and we're planning on a very prolonged war here. And the U.S. could start dropping bombs immediately, and you could be looking at logistical flights filled with ammunition to continue to keep those suckers firing. So we might have already moved all of our defense assets into the region, and we might be stockpiling ammunition right now and moving them to those defense sites. And we might have a certain level of ammunition that we're waiting on to reach those critical levels where we go, we'll be good till we can get more in, and boom, Bob's your uncle, and we let it ride. From what I can tell, there's no new date that's been set for the United States to have more talks with Iran, but we are planning on having them in the future. We just have no idea when that's going to be. Meanwhile, over inside of the United States, people are worried about everything that's going on with ICE, everything that's going on with fraud, everything that's going on with, illegal immigration for some reason. When the actual big story here is the entire Middle East is about to get reshaped and it's about to change world history. And Iran's not going to go down without a fight. I would be shocked if U.S. service members do not get killed following this. I would be shocked if we don't see large amounts of casualties coming out of Israel following this. And oh, by the way, Israel is then going to probably launch a massive campaign against Hezbollah, trying to wipe them out once and for all. And we'll probably see Saudi Arabia go ham over inside of Yemen to send a message to the regime, because that is going to be the time when the regime is at the weakest, and we will restore the Middle East to where it actually belongs. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you learned something today. I know I certainly do every time I come on and talk to you. And I'm going to see you guys back here again this evening. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, peace, love, happiness, and God bless. I'm out of here.
We'll go by it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them.